Hey everyone, it's Jamison Cable of the Land Between the Meadows, Kentucky History Podcast. I just want to say thank you for your support and listening to this episode. For all the updates on our podcast and YouTube channel, youtube.com/Kentucky History Channel, like and follow us on Twitter and Facebook at KY History Pod. If you're enjoying the podcast, give us a good rating and review on Apple Podcasts or the podcast platform that you're listening to. If you're looking for ways to support the podcast, an easy and simple way is to share it on Facebook or any other social media and tell your friends. You can also go to audibletrial.com/KYHistoryPod and get a free book of your choice. And finally, you can visit patreon.com/KYHistoryPod if you want extra content from us. If you're already a patron, thank you for your support. It means so much to us. All the links I've mentioned are in the description of the podcast, so go check them out. Thanks again for listening. I hope you enjoy this episode. And remember, if it's not about Kentucky, it ain't worth a hill of beans.
In the pines, where the sun never shines, you'll shiver when the cold wind blows. There's a grave in the pines, where the sun never shines. There's a grave that's shaded with the pines.
During the daytime, by paying attention to the pug nose, buck teeth, red hair, and other general characteristics of the children who straddled riddy bobs made by planks stuck through the horizontal slates of the wooden fence, local residents could pretty much tell what family lived where. That is, of course, if all the above were stationed in front of their own dwellings, which more often than not, they weren't. To the frequent visitor, however, and especially at night, and even more, especially if one were as drunk as a skunk, all the houses in Society Row looked exactly the same. So much so, in fact, that if a person weren't familiar with the territory, he could easily walk through the front door of one house thinking it belonged to another, which had been known to happen on more than one occasion. I remember Mom telling about how some drunk man had accidentally walked in on old Miss Skeens while she was sweeping her kitchen, and she about beat him to death with her broom handle before he could escape. I never heard whether he finally got to his intended destination. That's another excerpt here from The Muddy Branch, Memories of Eastern Kentucky Coal Camp. Oh, go ahead.
It just shows you how convoluted, the situation was in these coal towns and the houses and so forth. And we were talking a few minutes ago, and in the 1930s to about 1939, when many of these towns started rising up, some of these houses were just boxes.
Oh, yeah.
They had no interior 2x4s or divisions. And sometimes when they wanted a lot of help, sometimes coal companies would put two families in one house, living like that.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Would cause a lot of confusion.
Yeah, they all lived in one room, two families, and sometimes they were large families, and you can say, like, don't come over on my side of the house. There'll be a fit over here.
You stay on this line.
You stay on this line. Yeah. And while all this was going on, oftentimes higher up in the hills overlooking these towns were the overseers and sometimes the owners that were very nice.
Oh, yeah.
And they overlooked these towns. Crazy.
Yes. So welcome back to The Land Between the Meadows, a history of Kentucky.
On that word of crazy.
We're, again, continuing our talk about coal in Eastern Kentucky, but a few shout-outs we have to talk about here. First, we had a listener, our good friend Josh Robbins. He's a faithful listener. And a few episodes back, we talked about school lunches. And he was at Uncle Charlie's restaurant, or no, not a restaurant, sorry, excuse me. I assume it's a meat shop in Richmond. And he found the old square rectangle pizzas that we have at lunch.
Huh.
And he sent me a picture, and I'll have to probably tweet it out or something. He made himself a rectangle pizza, corn, and French dressing. Had him a big old-fashioned school meal.
Oh, that is. I've had many of those. Yeah. Pretty good. Look forward to it. It was, yeah. It was the highest spot of my day.
Yeah.
Maybe of my life.
Pizza day. Line me up for pizza day.
Oh, man. Doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah. Another listener, Molly Ann, out in Owensboro, sent us a message about the Battle of Sacramento and Molly's Ride.
Old Bedford Forest.
There you go. which they have a Civil War reenactment this year on May the 16th on Saturday. If you're in Owensboro and you want to check that out, check it out. But something that I guess we could probably look into a little bit more and maybe find out more about Sacramento. I tell you, I'll be honest, whenever I saw that message of Sacramento, I was like, I don't Sacramento, Kentucky. What are we talking about?
Yeah.
But anyway.
She saved Nathan Bedford Forrest Bacon,
Mm-hmm.
you know. They were trapped by the Union forces, and he just happened to stop by this little shack of a cabin, and this young, very beautiful young girl, 16, 17 years old, was barefoot standing out in front of the house, and he asked her if there was a ford somewhere around, and she said, "Why, sure, I know where it is. Dad waters his cows or takes them down there about 1.5 miles from here."
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Hop on." So she leaped right up behind him, as I remember, held on to Nathan Bedford and rode down the dirt road, showed him where the ford was, and he crossed over and got away from the Yankees and then wound up beating the hell out of them.
Well.
Yeah. It was all because of her. He didn't, destroy.
Yeah, yeah.
So she came in pretty handy.
Another thing
As women sometimes do.
they do. Another resource.
You better say that. Your wife's listening.
Another resource, I stumbled upon this completely by accident, but I think if you're listening, you might find it interesting. I stumbled up on a YouTube channel and a Facebook page called Family Tree Nuts, and it's run by Russ Carson Jr., and I was watching some of the videos, and I shared one of them on our Facebook page. And he's made these videos, these 1, 2, 3 minute videos about historical sites in Kentucky. He did one on the Wilderness Trail, which I saw was pretty interesting, and a bunch of other stuff. But he does a lot of genealogy as well, and I don't know as much about genealogy.
Sounds fascinating.
But it's really, really good stuff. And if you want to check it out, He's got some good videos.
You stumbled upon YouTube, and I stumbled out of my house.
Yeah.
So everybody's stumbling,
Yeah. But if you want to contact us or connect with us, you can tweet us at KY History Pod, or you can find us on Facebook, The Land Between the Meadows, at KY History Pod there as well. So let's get back to...
when we left off talking about tweeting and Tweety birds and stuff, we were talking about the old mule that drowned in the pond outside the mine entrance.
Yeah.
I was thinking, if you're about 1 mile underground and your little parakeet turns bottom side up and the mule runs out of the mine and drowns in the pond and your cobalt lamp on your head goes out, it's about time to reach for that, half pint in your back pocket, in the dark. Because things aren't looking good.
They're not looking good.
They're not looking good. What there is to see. Yeah. A mile underground in the dark.
About that. Your lamp goes out. You are in the dark.
First clue. The mule hightails it out of there.
Yeah.
Second clue, the bird dies.
Anyway, back to our discussion.
Then the lights go out.
Yeah, back to our discussion. But again, as I said, exploiting Eastern Kentucky in these places, and that's what happened again and again. Somebody would find out, hey, I could probably make some money. They roll in there to make some money, get some people to invest, and so forth. And it happened time and time again. There would be people who'd put in ads in the Lexington Herald or the Louisville paper, Courier Journal. I don't know if it was the Courier Journal at that time in the early 1800s.
Might have been.
It may have been.
It's pretty early.
It happened again and again. Lee County was a place that had happened where they put out an ad said, "Come, let's find some coal." And
if you can't exploit your kin, who can you? We're kin.
Yeah. That guy's name is Thomas Flowhaven. He
Go to heaven.
Yeah, he put in an ad. He bought some mining supplies in Lexington.
A shovel and a pick.
A shovel and a pick, exactly. In like 1806,
Wheelbarrow.
Loaded up a bunch of guys, went up to the mine in Lee County, started mining. A year later, he dies, and it all goes away. There's nothing else. There's nothing else comes of it. But again and again, this happens. Brings us to a feller that we need to talk about first. And we'll have an episode on this guy on his own because he's his own. He's worth his own.
Weight in gold.
Weight in gold. Well, weight in coal. Let's go with that.
Yeah.
And he comes.
Which isn't much.
This guy's a teacher. His name is John C.C. Mayo. And he is.
Looking for a way out.
Yeah, exactly. And he is he's either the savior of Eastern Kentucky or he's the devil of Eastern Kentucky. Depending on who you talk to, is going to be a different thing. But he comes up...
Depends on whether you're a stockholder or a laborer.
Exactly. He comes up with this form, this deed called the...
Broad Form Deed.
The Broad Form Deed. And that really, in my view, it's terrible. I mean, it honestly is terrible. The way it's able to just strip people of their land,
They sell
their
all
rights.
the mineral rights under the ground.
Like-
So it's not transferable. If you own the land and you sell it, it's for perpetuity. You know, it's forever.
Yeah.
They own it. They own
Yeah.
all the mineral. And they can take an
They
option
can
on
do
it.
whatever they want to do with the
nothing,
land.
Or they can
don't
strip
have
mine
to.
it in their house too.
Yes, and
Yeah.
him and his wife. So he was a teacher in the late 1800s, early 1900s.
Yeah.
Him and his wife would go around to different people's houses. Hey, we want to buy this mineral, and I mean, they would give them like a silver dollar, or they would give them
Oh yeah.
for the time a lot of money. You would think, but then that he would then turn around though and sell it for more
Yeah.
to a company or whatever, whoever it may be, and they would then come in with that broad form deed, do whatever they wanted.
That's right.
And they would make a mine.
Still doing it today.
Yeah.
Trying to.
And the broad form deed is no longer active. That's been done away with, but it doesn't mean there's not other ways around getting the mineral rights. But he would do this all around, Paintsville and those areas. That's what that's what he went around doing, and he became, of course, a millionaire. He was probably one of the richest people in Kentucky during the time. But they would buy up all these lands, and it would just, hey, you have minerals under your land, I want to buy it, and then he has the rights to it. And very shady, I would guess. I understand, he at the time he was probably seeking to make some money in some sort of form. Teaching probably was definitely not paying the bills for him, and in a way took advantage of a lot of people, because you go up to a local person, hey, I want these. Most of the deeds that were signed were done with an X, because they couldn't write, they couldn't read or write, and they would just sign it up and go.
Talking
go
about teachers.
yeah.
Do you know those early teachers that my mother was like that. As part of your salary, you get bed and board, and so you would rotate around and stay with the parents for like a month or two, and then switch to another parent, and they had to put you up and give you a room and feed you, and that was part of about 3/4 of your pay.
Yeah. Wow. That
you move and live with your
interesting.
parents in their houses. Get to know things that way.
Yeah.
It'd make you want to go out and mine coal.
There wouldn't be too much of a, hey, you need to line out your boy, because you'd be right there with them.
That's right.
Talk about a village raising a kid. That's definitely the case.
My mother did that.
That's pretty interesting.
She became a coal miner.
We've mentioned this before, and it won't be a hard question, but over the time, you have Eastern Kentucky and Western Kentucky coal. And obviously, we kind of assumed that Eastern Kentucky coal was probably discovered first as far as European settlers, because they came from the east. Yes. But then the first coal camp or the first coal mining was done in Western Kentucky.
That's right.
But then over the time, once things started gathering,
it's more accessible.
Western Kentucky was the big coal beds. That was the one that produced the most and that forth. Yeah. But we mentioned it before. What boosted Eastern Kentucky? Trains. Once the trains started coming through, it changed everything.
It did.
There was a lot more things, a lot more resources available.
No more flatboats. Flipping them down the bank.
They took, we don't need to sell no barge down there. We're loading up on this train and we're getting it out. And of course, technology kind of picked up as well. Now, of course, at the end of the 1800s, the stuff they're doing is still pretty dangerous as far as going in there and digging.
Some of them that had coal tipples where they brought the coal out, and the trains came in. The trains didn't have, like we think of today, that were just running down the railroad track. They backed in. They backed the train in, sometimes miles, back up in a holler, and then loaded it and then came out. And they also brought in supplies like groceries.
Yeah.
I live next to an old man. He's dead now. And he used to tell me stories. He ran the first grocery store down around Corbin, Kentucky. And he said once a month the train would back in with a boxcar and to give him all of his supplies at an old country store for a month. And then they would leave. But the train backed in through the mountains.
Wow. And that was really the game changer for Eastern Kentucky. And now
railroads.
Here's an interesting fact. So this is in Pennsylvania, so in 1860, a Pennsylvania mine reached 1,500 feet into the earth. Now, that is not. I'm not saying 1,500 feet down, but if you walked it all, 1,500 feet. Wow. So that was in 1860. So from 1860 to say late 1890s, 1900, we're getting deep.
Keep the parakeet in the cage.
Yes. And up until probably the 1900s, things were pretty much were pretty
When you see
basic, I guess.
When you see that,
When you see that parakeet pass out.
kick the bucket, you better run for the door.
Yes,
You better pull on the chain and start.
That's how it was.
Let me out of here. That's right.
Yeah.
Your coal lamp starts flickering.
You
the
get out of there.
parakeet
You get
dies.
out of there. No. So once we get to the 1900s, though, we got railroad tracks.
Go back to school teaching.
I don't know about this darkness down here. And it's just another side thing to think about as far as coal mining. Terrible job, tough job to have.
Mm-hmm.
But I've watched some of these videos of these coal miners in the 70s and so forth in the mine. I mean, it's completely dark. You're down there, and they have these headlights on.
Yeah,
That's it. That's all they got.
Yeah.
And
If your light goes out, just
you're fumbling around, buddy. Hopefully your night vision kicks in.
night vision. There is no night vision. But you're expected to do with a pick and shovel,
Yes.
2 box cars
Shovel up this,
in on the dock.
Yes.
Carry it out.
It is insane, and the amount of labor that was put into that.
Yeah.
You talk about 1,500 feet
Yeah.
under the earth. How much that?
I bet when those boys were swimming in the pond,
Yeah.
I bet they never even questioned why
They never question what they.
why the mule died. They know why I died. Grandpa's in there probably laying next to him.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good line. Invest in parakeets if you want to see your granddaddy.
That is true. And when we look at coal mining and coal companies in general, a point we'll make, and this happens time and time again because it happens in stages. Really, you look at 1890, or let's say 1880 to 1890, when the railroads were first laid into eastern Kentucky, and maybe a little bit before then. But you're looking at this environment that is created, which is all going to lead to this coal camp, the coal camps that were established throughout the time there. But you got this land, you got this resource, and it all fits together. You have a resource that's really valuable at the time, and you could argue it's valuable now as well, not as much, obviously. But then you have these people that are on this land, that have been on this land for many years, and then they become connected to this resource. And then as we go throughout time, you look at coal strikes, coal accidents, all these things happen, but yet the people there are still connected to this resource. Right. And the question nowadays, of course, is how do you break that connection? Is it possible to break that connection? Right. Or even can you break that connection?
Right. Speaking of people getting screwed,
Yes, it is.
Even modern day, just a couple of weeks ago, we saw where that trainload of coal was leaving eastern Kentucky,
and
the miners stopped it.
Yes.
They've been paid for a month.
Yes,
and they were sending the coal out. They were saying, we want our money before that coal leaves this valley, because then you're going to we're never going to see anything.
Yes.
And they finally worked out, after weeks of protesting, and the women, the children, and
all of
everyone
them
standing on the tracks, bonfires and everything.
How many times do you think that's happened through the years?
I don't know. I don't
know
whether
many.
It should have happened many times, but how many times did the train leave and then they never got anything? That's what I'm thinking.
And I should rephrase my question. I'm not saying how many times did they literally block a train, but how many times did coal miners go on strike?
Oh yeah.
How many times did
for their rights?
They finally And that's the thing. That's the interesting thing about Eastern Kentucky and coal miners and coal in general is the will of the people. Because you think about these local people who have broken their back.
That's right.
To make so many people rich in cases. How many times these local people had to stand up for themselves again and again.
If they didn't, they'd get nothing.
And my point or my argument for all this is when you look at Kentucky, some of the toughest Kentuckians are the people from the East. Not because of any other reason, really, except for coal. Having to fight for themselves.
Praise the Lord for United Mine Workers that organized it.
Yeah, and we'll get into all that.
That's another story.
That is another story.
We keep saying this coal thing's going to get you going.
It has. I got a book about the John Mayo coming in. I got to get on to it to find out about him.
You feel this culture.
It does. I know.
In your soul in Mount Vernon growing up. It's radiating from Eastern Kentucky. It's kin. You said you had some kin that had.
Yeah. Well,
and
I married my wife, and she's from there.
And your wife's from there. So I mean, this radiation of being tough and strong and being messed over, by the company store or the company, is a story that runs true. And it's amazing. It's probably in you right now.
Yeah, and
I ain't gonna teach no more.
Do you pay me right?
You pay me right now. I ain't taking script anymore.
Yeah. And the script, I talked to my wife's grandma, and she talked about the script. And she said that everything you did was right there at the company score. You had the script, and they would come in. This one guy would take it. You would go get your groceries and take it to this one guy. He would measure up all your groceries. You would go to this other person. They would mark down your script.
How much do you make this week? Yeah, it's just about what your groceries are.
Yeah, what do you know? Ironic.
We'll settle on that. You owe us for the electric bill.
But
most of the coal camps didn't have electricity.
That's very true and very interesting. Like you would think, why aren't they worshiping this?
No indoor plumbing.
No indoor plumbing. Outhouses, the whole place.
And some of them might not even have running water.
Mm-hmm. Well, we are just
a single-story house with 4 rooms.
Yep.
That's it.
And guess what happened whenever these coal miners would strike? Water's out, electric's out, everything's out. Now,
store closes.
Those are more of like in the 70s when you had plumbing. Well, most of them. I wouldn't say they had plumbing, running water. I would say. I don't think any of them had plumbing up until too recent.
No.
But anyway,
go piss off the riverbank.
Go swim with the mule. Take a bath.
Take a bath. Seriously,
that's exactly what it was.
Let's jump in.
Yeah,
we got that dead red mule, but let's go in.
Now, for these episodes, we've probably been jumping all over the place.
We have, but that's good. That tells us what's to come.
But yes, and that's what it is. For these,
we're shook because we're from Eastern Kentucky. We're bouncing all over the place.
These issues or these things, they all like we've said again and again. History repeats itself, or not repeats itself, connects to each other,
man.
And so much. And all these things you take
far out.
Back in 1790,
resources and game trails.
When Daniel Boone's trekking through places, setting these
game trails, game trails,
all this stuff,
Buffalo,
it all connects
deer,
to
elk.
The paths they came in then, set up the paths that these coal miners and these Eastern Kentucky people would eventually set up and follow. Yeah, they still follow them and setting things up. Even now they go through the Daniel Boone National Forest to get to 75 in Western Kentucky.
Else.
Yeah, or wherever they're going, who knows? Don't go to 75 places. People drive like maniacs.
That's right.
We're setting these things up because there's so many events, individual events that have happened to coal miners in Eastern Kentucky. Again, and people that came in to make their money and exploit.
And I think
people.
too that about Eastern Kentucky is I like those first libraries that were on horseback, and then the frontier nurses too that birthed.
Yes.
The midwives that birthed babies up in hollers and rode horses, and that just seems so cool to me. The enclosure of Eastern Kentucky trapped them to a certain extent. These people grew up in hollers. They didn't have a lot of awareness of the outside world or laws or fairness. And the education we talked about, around the turn of the century, 50% of the superintendents were illiterate. I mean, and how are these people to have the resources of education to even have alternatives? It's all they'd known, one generation after another. And they had large families. With a lot of children.
You get somebody rolls in here and says, hey, you take this pickaxe and this cart and go down there and dig me some coal and I'll give you this money.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay,
and that's all there was.
Yeah.
He didn't say, I'm going to be an
physicist. No. There was an option. Or a rocket scientist or anything.
That's true.
But anyway, let's try to wrap this up here.
But it is that isolation.
It is.
It helped to create this. Yeah, there weren't choices.
Yeah, you don't have any options.
When they talk about Appalachia today, they talk about let's get more options. Let's get industry in there. Let's get some other things going. Basket weaving or whatever it is. Train for factories or medical or whatever. So that people can take care of themselves and get things in. Coal seemed to boom when the first railroads backed into the coal areas.
Yes.
And they ran it up to Cincinnati and places like that. And then that's when they really got serious.
Yes.
They had a market.
And that's, you get somebody nowadays, even now, you can hop on Hal Rogers Parkway and drive right out of Eastern Kentucky. Right. But you look 100 years ago,
you couldn't.
That's not happening.
That ain't
not happening at all.
No.
You have to have a good horse.
You got to have
a good path
Yep.
to get out. And that wasn't available.
6-shooting revolver and be accurate with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Multiple cylinders in your pocket.
Exactly. So let's try to wrap this one up again. We'll get to more detailed. I hope the point of...
I want to hear more about shooting out of Eastern Kentucky. That's what I want to hear about. I want to hear stories.
Oh man.
I want to hear stories.
There is. And we're getting into those.
We're setting the base here.
We're setting the base. We got a base settled, I think.
I think so.
And when we're climbing up the mountain, we're going to get up to bigger and more in-depth things.
Climbing the mountain, boy, that's a good metaphor.
Yeah. And so if you have anything you want to add, any Eastern Kentucky tidbits that you have that you could guide us to. I mean, there's so much. I got plans for, I could do 5 to 10 episodes on events in Eastern Kentucky, but we'll get to there. But if you have anything, you can always find us on Twitter at KY History Pod, or on Facebook at KY History Pod, or that's really it. Or if you find us locally, good luck. And
give us a shout first so we can duck and crawl under a table or something.
Yeah, or you can email us.
Iron or whatever.
Yeah, you can email us, thelandbetweenthemeadows@gmail.com. Besides that,
thank you for listening.
Yes,
thank you for putting up with us.
Yes, thank you.
Hope you find this interesting.
And share us on Facebook. Share the podcast out there, and go find you a good pond to cool off with, and
make sure there's not a dead mule.
Make sure there.
And if there is, don't worry about it.
Yeah, if it's been dead for a while, them germs are dead.
Yeah, them germs. Germs don't float.
Yeah. All right. See you.
All right.
Thank you again for listening. But real quick, before you go, I want to give out our poll result. As you may remember, last week I put out a poll on where we would like to go with some future episodes for The Land Between the Meadows. Option 1 was stories from the past. Option 2 was county by county history. And option 3 was author interviews. And then, of course, the fourth option was all of the above. Now, thanks to Facebook and them only limiting 2 options per poll, or I just haven't figured out how to do more than 2 options, I had to put out 2 polls, which is okay. So I tallied up all the votes from Twitter and Facebook. And stories from the past had 36%, county by county history had 9%, and author interviews had 9%. But the winner of the poll, of course, was all of it, with 45%. So what we will do is we will start looking into all of it. And I might try to focus on stories from the past first, and then get some county by county and author interviews set up as well. So thanks again for taking the poll, and thanks again for listening. Once again, please share our podcast on Facebook, and share our Facebook page as well, and follow us on Twitter. Thanks again. We appreciate you listening. See you next time.